So I think, so when you ask me about the trigrams,
Hmm.
it's another one of those things where it's like people think it's beautiful, right? You get the three trigrams, or you get the trigrams, and you have a book that says if you have like smoke over the mountain, it gives you a way to understand that. What is the use of the trigrams? The use of the trigrams is you take sticks and the sticks fall out, and then you arrange the sticks and you get a trigram. It's meant to be like a game. And its use ended up being a game. Now, there are people who take it so seriously that they meditate on the trigram long periods of time, trying to understand the nature of the trigrams. But the problem is that's not how it works. Yes, you have three yin elements and three yang elements. Each one has two meridians. They come together. That forms the yin yang symbol. But then to sit there and say, well, we're just going to take the yin or the yang meridian from each element and end up with just 6 meridians representing the trigram just doesn't make sense. When they come together, it's 12 meridians. It's 6 elements. Each element has 2 meridians. It's 12 meridians. It just does not make sense to take out half of them and leave 6 and then try to make sense out of it. It's just a game. It ends up being just a game to try and tell people what to do with their lives, but it's not complete. The trigrams, it just doesn't work. It's not true. It's not true. So what do I? So I come along and I tell people, hey, this trigram thing is not true. It's based on true. It's based on reality. It's based on something that is true. But then what they did with it is not true. You can't just take out half of the meridians and say, okay, now it works. No, now it doesn't work. The key is to keep the spherical pattern in mind and realize there's always 12 meridians. I'm not going to take out 6 of those meridians on the spherical pattern and think it's going to make sense. No, you have to leave in every single meridian on the spherical pattern because that's its wholeness. You have to look at the wholeness. The trigram is cutting it in half. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Based on reality, but it's not going to work. So it comes down to knowledge. What do we know? We know astrology, Western astrology has a pattern. We know acupuncture has a pattern with all of its theories. So when you find a way to integrate Western astrology with Eastern acupuncture into the same pattern, and then that pattern begins to explain everything, you've unlocked the truth. In that moment of seeing kidney on the tip of one cone, and let me see if I can do this, kidney on the tip of one cone and heart on the tip of the other cone, and these two cones come together, you've got the yin yang symbol. That pattern came from Western astrology. And by matching up the symbols to Western astrology has within it the yin yang symbol. You know, it's that's when that's when it just you realize that is huge. The 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 most important symbol from Chinese tradition, spiritual tradition, is within Western astrology.
Do you say Yang Sun and Yin Moon in the astrology, in the Western astrology, the correspondency?
Well, the sun corresponds to the gallbladder meridian, which is
Mm-hmm.
a yang meridian. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the foot yang meridians.
Mm-hmm.
Another foot yang meridian is stomach, which would be the earth. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
these fixed energies. Fixed fire is yang, is the gallbladder, the yang meridian. But it's still, the wood and earth are both yin elements, but their yang meridians are fixed energies in Western astrology. Are you catching that? Yeah, it's,
Not sure.
you almost have to see the order to get that. But let me put it this way. The fixed energies of Western astrology, fixed fire, fixed earth, fixed air, and fixed water. They are all yang meridians in Chinese acupuncture. All of the all of the all of the meridians that come from the chest, lung, heart, and pericardium and flow out to the fingers, those are all cardinal energies in Western astrology. It's that beating, that activity. So they are the yin meridians of yang elements because they're generating, they're producing, but because of their activity being kind of impulsive, those are the yin meridians of yang elements. So then you go down to the feet, and those meridians coming up, liver, spleen, and kidney coming up from the feet, they're all mutable signs. They're all mutable signs from Western astrology. Liver's Sagittarius, Virgo, and spleen, kidney, and Pisces. So you have that beautiful mutable energy coming up from the feet, flowing, nourishing through the organs. And it makes sense that they would have a mutable nature. You're not going to read in 5-element theory that these meridians have a mutable nature until you connect it to Western astrology. And then you begin to understand their nature better. These are mutable energies. That's why they're so important to allow us to adapt. When women have trouble with their menstruation, it's so important to look at those foot yin meridians, kidney, spleen, liver, because that mutable energy is so important for washing and cleaning and regenerating and nourishing. It's like they're watery in nature. And you're not going to hear that in 5-element theory because 5-element theory hasn't progressed to the point of really understanding that. Because once you connect acupuncture to Western astrology, then Western astrology will teach you a lot of things about Chinese acupuncture that Chinese acupuncture doesn't know yet. The psychological aspect of acupuncture is very weak. You know, trying to understand emotions and what to deal with them and personalities. You look through the literature, the ancient literature in China about emotions, anger, concern, fear, worry. things like that. They basically just tell you, try not to have them. Try not to have fear. Try to control your anger, right? But the thing is it's more complicated than that. Western astrology has done a great job in understanding personalities. Some people are extroverted. Some people are sensitive. Some people are serious. Some people are calculating. Some people are gregarious. Some people are social. Some people are antisocial. Some people fantasize. And some people are very, there's all these different mixes of personalities, and astrology understands that. In five element theory, there are five emotions. In Western astrology, there's 12 signs interacting, creating lots of different emotions. So if you want to study psychology, you go to Western astrology. You don't go to Chinese acupuncture. But once you connect Chinese acupuncture with Western astrology and realize they come from the same language, then all of that psychological knowledge and tradition in Western astrology can now be applied to Chinese acupuncture like never before. So that now when we say heart, meridian, we can actually look into the astral horoscope chart of that person and see what's going on. Because the personality exists. The personality has a structure, and it's based on that pattern, that spherical pattern of all 12 archetypes communicating. And in a certain moment, that creates an image. And all of the archetypes, of the 12 archetypes, take a position within that image to express a personality. That happens when we're born. Cultures around the world know that our personality forms when we are born. In that moment, something happens, and our consciousness takes on a form, takes on a structure. The Mayans would call it the tonal. And so the Mayans would understand that tonal, the ability of your personality to organize the world, to understand it so that you can communicate with the world. It was the tonal. But everybody has a different tonal in the way it expresses. So the Mayans knew that. And other cultures too. So you have this personality in Western astrology that you can understand so much from the astrological chart. And now you're going to bring in Chinese acupuncture into the astrological chart of Western astrology. And now you're going to be able to understand much more in the astrology chart too. So by bringing these two huge traditions together, now through pulses, through the astrological chart, through tongue, looking at the tongue, looking at the eyes, looking at a personality, looking at the chart, you begin to see acupuncture and psychology, and you begin to see all of this coming together to really understand the person. If you just use Western astrology, you're just using the astrological chart. If you just have Chinese acupuncture, you're looking at symptoms and pulses and different indicators. You bring them together, you got everything. And it's all one language. And as you can imagine, this is a great breakthrough. And one thing, I have shown this to astrologers, Dane Rudhyar, Alan Oken, and many other astrologers who are considered very famous popular, many books. I have shown this to the top acupuncturists in the world, in the United States and around the world, mostly China and the United States, some in Europe. Nobody has ever said this is wrong. Nobody has ever said this is wrong and I know why. All they would say was, my way is right, and that's all they would say. My way is right, but they didn't know how to find a fault in what I was showing. There was no fault. There was no error. Everything was perfectly fit. And there was an explanation for everything. People say, well, Chiron, how can Chiron govern Virgo? Chiron's just this little planet that's just not even really a planet. It's too small. And I say, I tell them this. The first couple of books I was reading in astrology, the first couple of books I was reading through this progression of the planets, reading from Venus to Mars to Jupiter to Saturn and then to Uranus. And I went, whoa. Wait. I was sitting there reading, I was going, wait. You can't just jump from Saturn to Uranus. You can't do that. I was thinking to myself, Saturn is hard and rigid, right? Hard and rigid. And then Uranus has these strong winds. And I'm thinking, no, if you have something rigid, comes a strong wind, it's going to break. No. That's not how it works. You have to find a way to make that rigid structure flexible, because it's the flexibility that's going to bend with the wind. Something you have to have, Virgo, you have to have something mutable between Saturn and Uranus. You have to. It's the only way that progression is going to make sense. This was like within the first month that I was reading and thinking about this stuff. I realized that and I said, no, there has to be another planet or something between Saturn and Uranus. So I went to the library. There was a university nearby, and I went to the university library and I began to look at books. And I found a book about Chiron. I was like, okay. I'm reading, and it's like, this is a little planet that was discovered back in 1977 at that time. It was discovered in 1977, and I was reading in 1982. So 5 years before I was thinking this little Chiron thing was discovered 5 years before. And then I began to realize that a lot of astrologers were saying, oh my God, this Chiron thing is amazing. They called it the Maverick. This thing is like truly a planet. This one lady was writing and says, Chiron transited over my moon, my mother died. When it transited over my sun, my father died. This thing's amazing. Something's going on with this planet, right? And I'm thinking to myself, now it may not be a planet. There may have been a planet between Saturn and Uranus in the past. And how do we know that? Because you look at Uranus, the planet Uranus, the surface is completely smooth. And you think to yourself, all of the other planets show meteors hitting them over the billions of years. So they have those craters on them. But Uranus doesn't. Uranus is smooth. Why is Uranus smooth? Well, because that means its surface is fairly new. Well, how can you have an old planet with a new surface? When two planets crash, they turn into a cloud of dust and then come back together, and they form the planet larger, but the surface is completely smooth. So the planet of Chiron, or the planet of Virgo may have collided with Uranus. There's evidence for that. There's other theories, but they can't prove it yet. Which means, just as if you cut off a hand or cut off a foot, the person can still feel it's there. Right? So if you take a planet that's supposed to be there and you collide it with another planet, you can still feel where it's supposed to be. You can still feel it. It's like you don't have a hand anymore, but I can still feel my hand there. You have the etheric hand. So maybe that planet is not there between Saturn and Uranus anymore, but there's an etheric energy there that you can feel. And then along comes this little thing called Chiron and starts to move in that etheric area of the solar system. It starts activating and reflecting that etheric energy between Saturn and Uranus. There is a way to understand this and still say the planet of Virgo is supposed to be between Saturn and Uranus. And then once you enter into that and you say, okay, I'm going to open my mind to this possibility that that planet was there at one point, but now something moving through there is going to activate that etheric energy. And then you begin to understand that's true. As I began to research Chiron, I wrote in my book about this, one of my acupuncture clients. She was a virgin at 32 years of age, and she didn't want to be a virgin anymore. And she was like, how can I do this? I'm not married yet, but I want to have sex, but I'm going to be a traitor to my parents because they don't want me to have sex before I'm married. She was so confused. So during the treatment, I looked at her birth chart. And she had this problem with Mars, the sexual energy. She wanted to release it, but she couldn't focus it. She was a Gemini, and she was like overanalyzing the situation. So then I was watching Chiron, and Chiron was going to transit right over her Mars, like in a month, like in 4 weeks. And I marked it was a Tuesday. Okay, I thought, okay, Mars is going to receive this transit from Chiron. And I began to think about that Chiron was going to come in here and heal her Mars. And that's what she needed, something to come in there and say, look, this is what we need to do, something practical to heal this. And so I didn't tell her. I just watched. And then the week before we had a treatment, so she came in and I talked with her and I said, well, how are you doing? And do you have any dates? I said, do you have any dates for the next week? Because she was always doing dating services, meeting people in restaurants and going on dates and trying to find someone that she could have a relationship. And she says, yeah, I have a couple of dates this weekend. Oh, great. So I'm thinking, okay, one of those dates is probably going to, they're going to get together. We'll find out. So the week passes and we have another session with acupuncture. So I'm asking her, how did it go? And she says, I had sex. And I said, when? Like something like this, right? When? She says, 2 days ago on Tuesday. And I'm thinking to myself, that's exactly the day Chiron transited over her Mars. It's exactly the day. And I said, well, tell me about how did it happen? She says, well, I went to the restaurant and I was supposed to meet a guy there from the dating service, but he never showed up. So I said, okay, he never showed up. So what happened? How did this happen if he never showed up? She says, well, a guy was sitting at a group at another table with a group of friends. He walked over and said, "Are you okay? Are you alone?" She says, "Well, I'm expecting someone, but he never showed up." And then he sat down, "Can I sit down with you and talk with you?" So he sat down and talked with her, and within 3 days, it was done. Exactly on that moment when Chiron was going to come around right on top of her Mars. And it's just one of these things that just confirms what you see. I saw that a lot in astrology. You can predict things in the future, but predicting something at that level with Chiron was for me a really big thing because it was so precise and it made so much sense. It had to happen. It had to happen. It was like her whole life coming to this one point in time, and Chiron was the main player, was the main energy. Years upon years, ever since she was a teenager, she's been wanting to know what that sex thing is, right? And then Chiron comes along and says, "Okay, let's do this." And so it's like, okay, Chiron really is a planet. It has a powerful energy. But how many astrologers are going to say Chiron rules Virgo? There's all these past patterns that you have to change. So I know I'm taking your one question about trigrams and adding in a lot more to it, but I'm showing you how knowledge has to go through an evolution. So that you look at trigrams and you say true or false. Well, it's limited. We know that now. Or I know that now. It doesn't work. Um, the astrological chart, Chiron, does that work as the planet of Virgo? Yes, it does. The Earth as the planet of Taurus, does that work? Yes, it does. How does it work? Through expressions of the personality. You don't look at the Earth. You look at expressions through the personality. And then you look at the sun, the houses, the ascendant, the descendant. When you look at the ascendant and descendant in the astrological chart, do you see power there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's the ascendant and descendant are 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 critical points in the astrological chart. When things move across them, there's change, and so finding the spherical pattern allows us to really understand things the way they should be and to integrate all this body of knowledge into one pattern. Even in Chinese acupuncture, the spherical pattern integrates all these separate theories, like meridians, 6 divisions, mother-child, 5-element. All of these different theories of meridians, they're all integrated into that spherical pattern. And then you come over to astrology, Western astrology, and you can see the astrological signs developing around it. But then you begin to see much more of how these astrological signs are progressing through different orders. You bring those two together, Western astrology and Chinese acupuncture, and you're able to see the whole picture.
Mhm. So, do you believe that these planets and all the astrological influences change or redirect or influences our uh, energy flows within the body, so our meridians basically, and then changes our way of thinking, our way of feeling, and then creates this kind of change.
I
So
want you to ask, I
that's
want you to ask that question one more time.
so. Do you believe that these astrological, astros, the planets, uh, everything we have in the astrology, that these planets, they influence our energy flow, that our energy that flows in within our bodies, which are the meridians. So these planets, when they uh, have their changes or their transits, our energy changes because we are influenced by them according to our date of birth and everything we have. So they change the way our energy flows work, and then we start to think and to feel and to act differently, causing the changes we see in our lives that astrology usually causes.
So are you basically asking if the planets cause the change?
Yes, in our meridians. And then once our meridians face changes, then we think differently, we feel differently, we behave differently, and we can have a cure, we can have a disease.
We have a physical body, and the physical body has to be on the earth, right? So how can a planet so far away affect us? Because we live on the earth in our physical body. Well, we're
It's
not we're not
metaphysics.
we're not just a physical body. We can leave this body, and then our point of consciousness, which is our personality, part of our personality, will leave the body as like a point of light with its own image of a body around it, like it's in an egg. And so it leaves into the psychic, some people call it the astral plane. And so our physical body stays, and the other body rises and leaves and begins to walk and look and talk and all kinds of other things. That psychic body, that astral body, cannot leave. It can go about as far as the moon and can't go any farther. So even that body doesn't really have a connection to the other planets. So you think, okay, even that body is kind of separate from the other planets. But we're not just a physical body, and we're not just the astral body, that psychic body. We also have another body, which is a mental body, which is much greater, it expands much greater. But and that body, with that body, we can travel to the other planets. In that mental body, beyond the astral body, we can actually go to the other planets and look at them. We can go straight there. There's no barrier that's keeping us from going there. So now we begin to see, okay, now part of our consciousness is in contact with those other planets. And if we go even a step further into that dimension, that plane where the spherical pattern resides, now we've contacted the whole universe. When you're in that consciousness with the spherical pattern, you can travel across the universe. You're in contact with the whole universe at that point. So in a physical body, I can't even jump very high off the earth, right? I try to jump, it only goes up that far. If I go out of my physical body into my psychic body, I can maybe almost reach the moon. And sometimes I can actually reach the moon. And that's about the limit. But I can't go to the other planets. But if I get out of that body and go into the mental body, it's a little different. It's the colors are brighter. There's no emotions, there's concepts, there's things that you see, and there's like a logical thinking process. Then you can go to the other planets. You can go to the surface of the sun. You can enter into the surface of the sun and look around. And if you get out of that body and go to the very core of your being at the spherical matrix, what they call the permanent atom, then you can go around the universe. You're not just limited to the solar system. So when our consciousness is formed, it's like this presence from around the universe comes into us, and it has to pass through all of the planets. The planets are part of that process. They're part of that structure. So in that moment of forming our personality, the planets are present because that energy has to pass through the solar system to get to where we are. So there are higher elements of our consciousness that contact the planets. So yes, the planets do impact us, and all of their impact and influence can come into the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and then work its way into the emotions in the physical body. Like I was giving an astrology class in Hawaii, and one of the ladies in the class said, here's my birthday, just take a look and see what you see. Okay. So I was looking through her past, and I saw this point in time where the planet Neptune was transiting right over, like here's her Mercury. She was born with a Mercury. The planet Neptune transited right over it and stayed right on top of it exact for 1 month. Stayed there for 1 month and then slowly moved away, backwards, retrograding. What do you think happened to her?
Neptune over which planet? Neptune
Mercury,
over
over
Mercury.
her
Oh,
natal Mercury.
something something with her mind. She kind of became crazy.
Yes,
Because Neptune is delusions, and Mercury is mind. So
that's exactly right. So let's kind of take this apart and look at it. She was a hospital administrator. She had a great job, very well educated. She was one of the administrators in a hospital. She had her family. Everything was in perfect order. Nothing was a problem. But, and then all of a sudden she started to feel this pressure on the top of her head. Now, when you look at the pressure on the top of the head, okay, the bladder goes through there, but the kidney meridian, which is Neptune, the kidney meridian also comes up and passes right over the top of the head. So the bladder meridian, which is Mercury, and this kidney energy from Neptune was colliding right here in her head. She had nobody explained this to her. I explained this to her like 5 or 6 years after it happened. She started to feel this pressure on the top of her head. And she began to lose her mind. She couldn't think. She couldn't focus. She began to say, what's going on? All she wanted to do was just go to a cave and meditate. But she couldn't. She had a job and she had her family. And she had a spiritual teacher at the time. And the spiritual teacher said, I have no idea what's going on here. And she said that he had no idea how to explain this. And then I come along like 6 years later and I say, hey, I know exactly what happened. It's the meridians. We're bunching up here. What you needed to do, well, she lost her job and she lost her family. It was that bad. She could not cope for 1 month. It was just 1 month. And it was so bad in that 1 month, she got a divorce. Her family, her husband said, leave the house, you're crazy. And she lost her job. And she started to just live on the streets, pushing like a grocery cart around the streets with bags of stuff and clothes. She completely lost her life in 1 month. And there was nobody there to help her and explain to her what was happening. It was that intense. And I could see it in the chart, in my book. I was going, oh my God, Neptune for 1 month down to the minute over Mercury? I'm thinking, I have to hear this story. And then, so 6 years later, I'm saying, look, I wish I was there. I would have explained to you, and I would have explained to your family. I would have explained to your job. I would have said, hey, look, she just needs 1 month to just go away.
Vacation.
Just let her go away for 1 month on the big island of Hawaii. Let her go into a little retreat, sit in a hut, and just stare at the stars. Just let her do it. Let her go. She'll be fine. It'll pass. In about a month, it'll pass and she'll be fine. Just relax. I wish I was there to just explain to everybody, don't worry. Don't freak out. She's not going crazy. It's just this energy that's opening up her mind. Let her open up her mind and then let her come back. She'll be fine. But there was nobody there to help her. And then she kind of looked at me and thought, oh my God, if you had been there, I wouldn't have lost my life. I wouldn't have lost my children. I wouldn't have lost my career. And I said, well, that's why we have to put all this knowledge together so that we understand how the meridians are reacting to the planets. Which goes right back to your question. I noticed it in planets and I asked her what happened. And then she started to describe the meridians and how they were reacting in that moment. So then we see the planets and the meridians have an interaction. Which, to answer your question, is just yes. What the planets are doing out there is affecting our meridians. It's changing them. It's making them move. It's making them making them excite them. It's making them full of energy, and it's disrupting others. So yes, I eventually got to the point where I just wanted to live my life day to day, so I didn't look at the planets. Because there's just so many things that you can see when the planets are moving. There's just so much you can see. And it's just too much. You have to just say, I'm just going to live my life and I try to understand each moment. But when I know somebody and all of a sudden they're kind of acting differently, maybe they're talking more or they're thinking more about business or they're There's just all of a sudden they're full of energy. I look at them and I think, I'm going to check their astrological chart, see what's going on. And most times it's Mars. Mars is being transited, or Mars is transiting to something, but there's this Mars energy that goes into them. And all of a sudden they get active and they want to do things. And it's like, it just happens over and over and over and over that astrology, you can understand astrology once you get into that deeper knowledge of our consciousness and how we are connected to the planets and how our consciousness really does go around the universe. You can understand astrology, but astrology is just part of the story. Because then you have to understand, where is all this coming from? From the spherical matrix. And the spherical matrix is projecting and expressing within the solar system.